Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to sharpen what is probably one of the most crucial tools you have, your own mind. In a world that is just overflowing with information and opinions and just noise, the ability to think critically, well, it's not just a nice-to-have skill anymore, it's your absolute best defense.
I mean, think about it. Every single day, you're just bombarded with headlines, hot takes, and viral posts, and they're all trying to convince you of something. So the big question is, how do you sort the real signal from all that static? How do you actually decide what to believe? That's what we're going to get into today.
The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates absolutely nailed it with this one. And this isn't just some dusty, abstract thought. It's a real call to action. What he was saying is that the most important thing we can possibly do is to constantly question our own beliefs and the world around us. Because a life without that kind of self-examination, well, are we really truly living it to the fullest?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk a bit more about why this all matters so much. Then we're going to dissect what an argument really is, learn how to tell it apart from things that just kind of sound like arguments, and then, the fun part, we'll spot some common logical traps. And finally, we'll put it all together into a practical toolkit you can start using like today.
Right, so this whole idea of an examined life is honestly more urgent now than it's ever been. We're going to see that philosophy and logic, they aren't just for academics and ivory towers. They are essential, hands-on tools for cutting through the confusion of our modern world with real clarity.
Okay, let's dive right in. If we're going to think critically, we have to start with the fundamental building block of all reasoning, the argument. And I'm willing to bet it's not what you think it is.
See, in logic, an argument isn't a shouting match. It's not about winning a fight. It's a structure. You have premises, which is just a fancy word for your evidence or your reasons, and you have a conclusion. That's the point you're trying to prove. The real magic is in that link between them, the claim that the evidence actually leads to the conclusion.
And arguments usually take one of two main paths. Over on the left, you've got deductive reasoning. Think of this like a math proof. It's airtight. If your premises are true, like all humans are mortal, and Socrates is a human, then the conclusion, Socrates is mortal, is absolutely 100% certain. Then on the right, you've got inductive reasoning. This is more like being a detective. The evidence makes the conclusion probable, but it's not a guarantee. Like if every single swan you've ever seen is white, you might conclude that all swans are white. It's a really strong guess, but there's still a chance you could discover a black swan tomorrow.
Okay, so now that we know what an argument actually is, let's sharpen those skills by spotting what isn't one. Because, let's be real, a lot of what we hear and read sounds like an argument, but it's missing that key ingredient, that structure of evidence actually supporting a conclusion.
For example, take this statement of belief. It's a nice thought, a great goal, but it's not an argument. It's just someone expressing what they believe. There's no evidence being offered, no because clause trying to convince you why this belief is true. It's just a statement.
And here's another one, a simple piece of advice. This is a suggestion, a recommendation for what somebody should do. Again, it's not a conclusion that's being supported by any logical reasons or premises. No one's trying to prove anything here.
And finally, a report. This sentence is just giving us information. It's stating a fact about an event. Now, these facts could totally be used as evidence inside of an argument for sure. But the statement all by itself, it isn't trying to prove a point. It's just reporting.
All right, now we get to the really fun part, logical fallacies. These are basically common mistakes in reasoning. They're like little cheats or mental traps that can make an argument seem way more convincing than it actually is. Once you learn to spot them, you'll see them everywhere.
First up, we have a true classic, the ad hominem fallacy. This is what happens when someone just totally ignores the argument and instead attacks the character, the motive, or, well, anything else about the person making the argument. It's a total diversion tactic.
And wow, this is a pretty brutal example of it. The original argument could have been about anything, tax policy, a new bike lane, whatever. But notice how the response just completely sidesteps the actual topic and goes straight for a personal attack. Someone's personal life has zero, and I mean zero, logical connection to whether their argument is sound.
Next on our list is the straw man. Oh, this one is sneaky. Here's how it works. You take your opponent's actual argument, you twist it, you distort it, you exaggerate it into something much weaker and kind of ridiculous, and then you attack that distorted version instead. See? It's way easier to knock over a scarecrow made of straw than a real person.
You see how this works? A pretty reasonable-sounding proposal for regulation gets blown up into this extreme caricature of wanting total government control. The person attacking isn't dealing with the real, nuanced position at all. They're just fighting this flimsy straw man they built themselves.
And then there's the famous slippery slope. This fallacy claims that if we allow one small thing to happen, it will set off this unavoidable chain reaction that leads to some horrible, disastrous outcome. The big problem, of course, is there's usually no good evidence to back up this supposed chain of events.
Here's a real-world example from our source material that illustrates this so perfectly. The argument takes this massive, unproven leap. It connects one very specific action, allowing a certain kind of slaughterhouse, to a totally catastrophic and honestly pretty unlikely outcome, the entire collapse of a food culture. The links in that supposed chain are just incredibly weak.
So, we figured out what arguments are, and we've identified some of the most common traps to avoid. Now, let's put it all together into a simple, practical toolkit you can use anytime, anywhere you come across a claim you need to think about.
It really all comes down to these 3 steps. First, find the real argument. Don't build that straw man we talked about. Do the opposite. Try to understand the absolute strongest version of their point. This is actually a cool concept called the principle of charity. Second, ask for the evidence. Remember, the burden of proof is on them to support their claim. And third, and this might be the hardest one, check your own biases. You have to be willing to admit that, hey, maybe you could be wrong. Are your own assumptions clouding your judgment?
So there you have it. With this toolkit, you are way better equipped to navigate all that noise out there. You can break down what people are really saying, spot the faulty reasoning, and think more clearly for yourself. So, the only question left is, what argument, what headline, or what belief are you going to put to the test today?